turn my phone off until I get a ping.
Randy, I sent you a message. I sent you a message. Okay. Welcome everyone. I'll call the meeting to order for our meeting December 13th. We'll start as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer by Pastor Craig Dilbeck of Victorious Life Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Lord, we come before you in the name of your Son, Jesus. We thank you for your grace and your mercy upon our community. We pause to ask for your protection upon our first responders. Be with our police officers, firefighters, and EMS as they serve. We pray for the doctors and nurses and medical professionals as they minister to the sick and infirmed. We pray for our teachers, educators, coaches, and community leaders as they influence a generation of world changers. God, show your wisdom to our elected officials as they humbly serve. Lord, we thank you that you supply all of our needs according to your riches and glory. We pray that our vision is illuminated with your truth, our ears quick to hear, our mouths slow to speak, our hearts full of compassion and grace, and our lives be abundantly full with love. May everything we say, everything we do, bring glory to your name. It's in the powerful name of Jesus that we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you. Again, welcome everyone. Is there anyone here for an item not on the agenda that they'd like to speak on today? Hearing none. Are there any, does the commission have any additions?
I have none. No.
Randy?
Yes, I would like to add the business items, the proposal from GovBuild to provide permitting process software for environmental health and other divisions, departments. And Carla and Mike are in the audience to talk about that and explain that.
Okay. So we'll add that to 7D.
Yes.
Sound good? Okay. Anything else? None? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Do you have the resolution numbers?
Okay. Well, you can fill them in later. I'm okay with however you want to do that.
Chairman, I would make the motion that we approve the consent agenda items 6A through 6R.
A motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hurst. I might ask the county administrator to just briefly provide some comment on what the transfer resolutions are for.
The transfer resolutions allow us to take money from various funds and put them into the reserve funds, whether it's the public works into special highway money, capital improvement, that fund that may not have spent all the money that's budgeted in the middle of the project, and put it in a reserve fund. Same with like economic development reserve fund. So they're all excess funds for excess money for future needs that were not planned.
And this is common every year.
Every year we have this on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. And would it be fair to say these are kind of like savings accounts for the county in a way?
In a way, it's, yeah. They're usually earmarked projects, earmarked items that we didn't get to, or we have excess money this year that we are preparing for emergencies in the future years.
Okay.
possible emergencies, I guess.
Would you expand on that just a little bit? Because as I read through this, it takes me back to our budget process of if these are funds that are transferred most every year, it would seem like in our budgeting that we're being a little loose if it's knowingly going to transfer to reserve funds. So you probably have a counter opinion of that, so delve into that a little bit.
Well, part of it is unexpected expenses that we want to prepare for, but the budgeting part, sometimes projects come in less than what we have budgeted for, or we don't get to them because of timing and contractors, various issues with, we don't get to that item and we don't have it in the next year's budget, that money, that budget authority goes away. So if we transfer it into the reserve funds, we can continue a project that we may not have gotten to.
Okay,
So that's why on budgets, we only may budget for a project or an expense 1 year. If we don't get to it, then we can move it and take care of it the next year without it being,
next
the
year's expense.
citizens being budgeted double for that same project.
Okay, that's a good explanation. And so these are the funds that those things usually occur to.
Yes.
And we really don't know that amount until February or so when everything gets closed.
Right, month 13 and working for prior to the audit, those amounts get transferred.
I guess after 4 years, I should have known that answer, but it seemed like A through J was a lot of transfers, so thank you.
Commissioner Hurst?
I think that this is a good use of the funds. For instance, I really agree with the fact that maybe we didn't get the contract, it didn't get fulfilled, and you know you're going to be doing it anyway, but somehow it got delayed, and so those funds are there, and don't have to be taxed for the next year. Don't have to be in on the budget for next year, taxing in a budget for next year. And also, you never can tell when state's gonna come in and condemn a bridge.
Mr. Chairman, would you ask the one or two of the parties in the audience to better discuss 6L about the establishment of the reimbursement of stipend for volunteer firefighters?
Yeah. Adam, are you prepared to talk about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Adam Weiss, our Emergency Management Director. The resolution that's in front of you today about the reimbursement for the stipend of the firefighters, several years ago, back in 2010, there was a resolution that was established that gave a reimbursement to our volunteer firemen of a $10 stipend and then a $10 reimbursement, meaning they get $20 per call. And also for training, they received a $10 stipend for that training. So that means when our rural firemen, our volunteer firemen would run out to a call, regardless if that call was 10 minutes or 10 hours long, they were receiving a $20 reimbursement. Sometimes those calls, such as the Cottonwood fire back in April, would span several days, and they still only receive $20 per incident, so it never encouraged our volunteers to come back hour after hour or day after day because they're still only getting that $20. So we believe that increasing the stipend to a $12.50 stipend, $12.50 reimbursement for a total of $25, and repeating that stipend every 2 hours up to $100 per day per incident would encourage our volunteers to not only stay on scene for multiple hours, but also come back the following days. $100 per call isn't a lot, but it could encourage someone to take off more time from their full-time job or have a babysitter at home. So that's why that's in front of you this morning, is to try to increase that pay just a little bit to encourage our volunteer firemen to stay on scene or to return to the scene the following day.
Okay, some of those fire districts struggle with having enough money, and certainly they're fairly large levies in some of the rural districts for their district, but you feel those funds can handle this extra cost?
So this is something we prepared for in the past year, and before we presented 2023 budgets to you, we did ask for a budget increase in the personnel line item of approximately 33%. So everyone's personnel line item was increased for the year of 2023, so we believe that there will be enough money to be sure that our firefighters are paid and the budgets are in good shape.
Could you give a quick overview of how the volunteers throughout the county, are we steady on those? Are we continuing to lose volunteers? Where are we?
So we're steady on the number of volunteers. The bigger issue across the county are being able to take off during the day. It's volunteerism now isn't quite like it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We don't get a great response during the day or middle of the afternoon. Nights and weekends, we get a great response when people are home, when people are with their families. But it's just a change in thought from the employers. They're not always letting their firemen run on calls.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like a good change.
Yeah.
I know they work really hard, and it's not a lot of money to do that. Appreciate that. Any other comments?
I guess I'd like to make one more comment on item 6M, which is the approval of the county administrator's 2023 employment contract. I'd like the audience and people listening at home to know the process that goes through on this is that the administrator does a self-evaluation, and then the 3 county commissioners do evaluations, and those are collectively talked about and reviewed with the county administrator, and both pros and cons are discussed. And the reason I bring this up is I feel very strongly that maybe the biggest job and the most important job of county commissioners is to do a thorough review of the county administrator. I just wanted the county to know that that took place this year.
Thank you, Commissioner Sellers. Any final comments? Hearing none, roll
Very thorough process.
call, please.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen.
Yes. Moving on to item 7A, Reno County insurance coverage. I think Bob Fee is here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Bob Fee with Fee Insurance Group. We're at 2920 North Plum Street here in Hutchinson. And we provided in your packet a kind of an overview of the insurance program for the coming year beginning in January. I guess I want to first say thank you to the staff at Reno County. They are a pleasure to work with, and we have appreciated working with so many great people here on whether it's working through problems, issues, renewals, claims, all of those things. They've been fantastic to work with. This year, Mr. Partington asked that we go out to the marketplace and see what else is out there. You've been with Travelers on your commercial package policy, including crime and cyber for the last 10 years. And so we went out to Midwest Public Risk, which is a risk pool for cities, counties, and some school districts. We also went to a company called Alliance Specialty, which specializes in large property in the Midwest, as well as they'll take on liability lines and work with municipalities. And then we went with EMC Insurance Company, which also does municipalities. The municipality marketplace is somewhat limited. There are not a lot of standard insurance markets that work in the municipal space for a variety of reasons. Law enforcement liability is a specialty that not all companies have. There's a lot of uniqueness to a municipality. There's the Kansas Tort Claims Act that caps claims at a certain level for municipalities. And anyway, it's a specialty type of insurance. Midwest Public Risk and Alliance Specialty both declined to quote this year, citing the ongoing claim that we're still working on here at the county. courthouse, the earthquake claim. So they both preferred not to step in during the course of a claim and did not quote. EMC did quote and want to get as competitive as possible. They understandably were wanting to know where Travelers' numbers were coming in, which we don't do. It's kind of give us your best effort. And you can kind of see on that, the quote, where the two came in. They're similar. EMC was a little bit more aggressive on property rates than Travelers is. However, they don't offer two lines of coverage that one of which we've used, earthquake coverage and flood coverage. So we would have to go out to another marketplace to look for those lines of coverage. The other thing that they have put in place, their deductibles are a little bit different. Travelers has a 1% wind and hail deductible with a $100,000 minimum. So the courthouse is valued at $19 million. A claim here would be a 1%, $190,000 deductible. I do have some buy-down premiums that we can look at as well. With EMC, that percentage deductible is $25,000. I'm sorry, is 2%, not 1%, but 2%. But they have a $25,000 minimum. So the minimums are a little bit different, but overall, the Travelers is what it was a year ago, and they did not change from that. They did increase the deductible on your contractor's equipment from $1,000 to $5,000. Overall, though, the Travelers' rates were not unexpectedly high at all. They were actually very good. I felt good about the EMC coming in and being competitive, but their rates are just a little bit higher. And we also asked EMC not to quote the crime and cyber policy. They do not have the forms that Travelers has, and that is a coverage that is very much something you need, and I did not want to move that or disrupt what we were doing with Travelers. It's a standalone crime and cyber policy. We put it in place about 4 years ago, and Travelers has one of the most comprehensive forms in the insurance business when it comes to cyber coverage, and then they wrap the crime in, and oftentimes a cyber event can coincide with crime, and you don't want to have a misstep in was it crime or was it cyber and which policy responds. I would say that the insurance marketplace, in the executive summary, I kind of talked about or put together a chart. We get a quarterly review of the insurance marketplace in the United States, and the latest numbers we have were through the third quarter of 2022. And you can see that the average, clear over on the end, the average pricing for insurance, commercial insurance across the country is up about 7%. Property being the biggest driver, which I was very pleased with our property rates this year. General liability is also driving. We don't have an umbrella liability policy here at the county. It is something I wouldn't mind discussing. You are under the Kansas tort liability cap. However, there are certain instances where that might not come into play. If there's a federal lawsuit, if there's an employment practices lawsuit that might be taken to federal court instead of state court, those caps do not apply. And so an auto losses sometimes might not be handled at the state. It's something to consider. We did not quote it. However, you've never had one. And then I provided in the next graph is just kind of a 10-year summary of the of the premiums that have been paid from the county and the paid loss expenses and any reserves that are out there, total incurred. And this is what insurance companies take a look at when they're looking at what does this look like? What's the trend look like? Well, the trend actually is really, really good, which is why EMC was very interested. Your trend line on losses has been very good. We have not had some of the wind and hail issues in the last few years. So that speaks well for us in Kansas, and that's why I think we've got a fairly flat renewal on property. Some of the other lines took a little bit of an increase, but not a dramatic amount. Any questions?
Commissioner Sellers?
Sure, I've got a few. I'd like to go first to your chart that shows the comparison between travelers for the upcoming year and EMC. And maybe I missed it, but Bob, why is the property blanket coverage actually lower?
With EMC,
No, with travelers than last year.
why is the premium lower?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they knew I was going out to the marketplace.
Well, thank you for doing that. Is
I
that,
think they wanted to be as
is
competitive.
that your best answer?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
They wanted to be as competitive as possible.
Okay,
And outside of the courthouse claim, they've had relatively few property claims, and that's where they could.
okay,
They did know where they needed to take rate, and oftentimes insurance companies look at the lines of business that they have to take rate on. Auto was a line. I believe the employment practices was another line that they needed. Law enforcement liability, they needed some, and we have had some events in those. Nothing that has turned into claims yet, but events. And so that's where they firm up some of the rates and figure out where they can be at the bottom line where they need to be, and then cut where they can cut.
okay. You mentioned in your presentation, you have some buy-down figures
I do.
as far as, I assume deductibles and so forth. I'm not sure that I want to know those, but I guess I'd like to have you and Mr. Partington say that you've discussed those and you suggest we stay where we're at, except for the one.
We've discussed
that went
them. The buy down, there, I have three different options, but I'll just talk about one. We buy down the 1% with a $100,000 minimum down to a $50,000 deductible per occurrence. That premium was $102,000 to buy that down.
Say that one more time.
The premium to buy down your 1%. So if we have a large hailstorm, 1% of the overall value of what's damaged is what's going to be applied. And if we want to buy that 1% down to $50,000 per occurrence, the premium on that is $102,000.
Difference.
Well, it's
Oh,
so
okay.
on the buy down coverage, we have to go out to Lloyd's of London. They are the marketplace for buy down coverage, and they're basically saying they're accepting a risk, and they're accepting
From 100 to 50.
They look at your overall total insured value, so they're looking at the total insured value and coming up with what they feel like their risk is, and they feel like their risk is about $850,000 to buy it down to $50,000 based on the 2%. So they're basically saying, what would it cost us to insure $850,000? And the amount that they're applying is $102,000 for that buy down. Now, it is a big roll of the dice for the county if we have an event that is widespread.
Okay, I think I understand that. I'd like to go to the chart that you prepared on, bear with me, on the 10-year summary of property losses that you referred to. And I guess my first question is to the county administrator. Randy, since you've been here in 2021 and 22, our incurred losses are the least of any of the last 10 years. And if I'm not mistaken, and that's why I'm asking you this question, didn't you approach this a little differently when you arrived and talked to department heads and so forth? Or is there a reason in your mind for this good showing the last 2 years?
I'm not real sure why. I mean, I think all directors, all staff, I mean, we're looking at ways to limit risk and do what we can to limit those costs. You know, we're changing the culture of the organization. That may help, but I don't know, I can't point to anything specifically of why those claims are so much lower in the past 2 or 3 years.
Well, if you look at that chart, those are significant numbers, different than the prior 8 years. So something is either being good to us, or the employees are looking at this differently, doing something different's occurring, it seems to me.
I think,
Yeah,
the employees.
I think Mr. Fees told some of us in the past on different companies that you have, what, 2 bad years, 2 good years, and an average year or something on a lot of things and so forth.
It all evens out, doesn't
So,
it?
so I shouldn't look at that as such a good positive trend.
Yeah.
Okay. The question then on this same chart to you, Bob, is certainly we had a terrible loss on the courthouse deal, which I could get into why that shouldn't have ever occurred, but it did. So we had to incur it, and it looks bad on our rating and so forth. But as the carrier looks at this 10-year chart, do the most recent years have a higher rating of importance than the 10-year average?
Oh, I wish I could answer that, Commissioner. It depends on the underwriter and the philosophy and the overall company's appetite for risk. So a lot of things go into it. Facultative reinsurance right now has gone up, and that's what insurance companies buy to insure their excess risk. So it depends what they're looking at, and if they want to see 10 years or 5 years, typically we see 5 as the time frame, but we're seeing that elongated in some cases just because of the weather trends that have been common here in the Midwest.
Because if you look at 10-year totals of 3.6 million incurred losses, or no, 3.7 incurred losses, and 3.6 of premium,
They've
it
lost
really
money
hadn't, it
over
really
10
hadn't been
years.
very good for the
Break even.
company.
But they're making money on your money. I mean, they invest your premium dollars into surplus, and that's what they utilize to pay claims.
Okay, I think those are my questions.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think Commissioner Sellers brought up a very good point with regards to the losses. It appears that not only the directors and the management, the administrator, but the employees are taking a part in not only the health aspect of themselves, but also the working conditions and the respect for one another. And I think that all adds up, and it makes a big difference. So from that aspect, I just want to tell all employees, thank you for their efforts.
Well, certainly the last 2 years have been fantastic, and I don't think you could ask for a better 2-year period than what's shown on that sheet.
I was worried last night when I heard things rumble through.
Should have been flying into Wichita while that was going on.
Well, Bob, thanks for the presentation. Appreciate you providing a very good summary to us that wasn't overly complicated. I know this is a very complicated thing you do every day, and it's one of my least favorite things to do is look at insurance coverage. So thanks for making that simple, and thanks to the staff for working so hard on this. It looks like there's a recommendation to continue with travelers, and that sounds good to me. Is there a motion to do that?
I would move to approve and authorize the county administrator to sign a renewal with Travelers, along with the approval of the cybersecurity agreement with Travelers.
It's a motion by Commissioner Hurst. A second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Sellers. Any final discussion on this?
Yeah, I guess any increase we don't like because we're trying to hold expenses down in the county. But with the national trends on insurance and the cost of repairing property and so forth, and if you look at what Florida's faced with, and I know we're not Florida and all, but at least we can buy coverage. And so I think this is a very nice renewal that the insurance company has presented to us today, and I support it.
I agree. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes?
Commissioner Sellers,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen.
Yes. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 7B, approve and adopt a new burn charter resolution replacing 2017-12. Adam Weisshire is here. Adam,
Good
I
morning,
see it.
Commissioners.
hang on. Your last name?
Weishar,
Weissar?
Wise, and then Har. It starts with a W. I
Okay.
usually answer to.
I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. Thank you for that. So, like, I wanted to maybe state at the beginning that this is, if you could help us understand what's changed, because I know you put in your cover letter some of those changes, and I went through and looked, and I sent Randy a note. I may be one that would like some more time on this because of some things that are changing and some feedback that I'm getting, but I just want to put that out front. Like, even though it was drafted as approve and adopt, we'll see where we get today. And of course, that's the commission's decision, but go ahead, Adam.
Adam Weiss, our Emergency Management Director. I also have Travis Boat with me today. He's our fire administrator. So after the wildfires back at the Cottonwood Complex last April, a group of us began to meet to draft a new burn resolution. Included in that group is Kansas Forest Service, U.S. Rangeland Management, the Agriculture Extension Agent, County Planner, City Planner, Hutchinson Fire Department, Reno County Sheriffs, Reno County District Attorney, and our rural fire chiefs. After several months and several drafts of this resolution, this was a cumulative effort, and this is what we kind of agreed on. Some of the major changes in this, the first one is Section 2 there. In our prior resolution, we had it in there where it was only for the unincorporated areas of Reno County. With this new resolution, we're allowing the incorporated cities to adopt the resolution if they so choose to. So there's just a blurb in there that says it can be adopted by the incorporated cities. What that does is it helps some of our smaller cities that don't have their own burn resolution to go out and just adopt the counties. And then it also assists our fire or our sheriff's officers when they go out to enforce the resolution, where they're just enforcing the county resolution. Go down to Section 3. Section 3 is a burn permitting process. So the burn permitting process is something we tried to incorporate a few years ago, and it's finally in front of us. And this is kind of what I would like to call a starting point for the permitting process. In the future, we want to try to start looking at a system and expanding this, so some of those calls can come out of our dispatch center, and we can start getting some of those burns reported online. But it all has to start with a proven permitting process. The permitting process is free. Someone would have to get on renogov.org and fill out a short questionnaire. And on that questionnaire, it goes through the resolution. They initial each section of the resolution. They've read it, and they would select their parcel of land that they want to burn, what they're burning, and they would get a permit number. That permit number is good through that calendar year, so they expire December 31st every year, and then the following year they would have to get a new one. The only downfall that we can find to this system is that each parcel of land would have to have their own permit. There's no way to go in there and verify several parcels on one permit in the system that we currently use. IT did an amazing job putting together this burn permitting process with the Schneider software that's already in place, but that is one limitation that we have found. And conversations with our group, although it's going to be tedious on some of our larger agricultural or farmers, we thought it could be a benefit as well, because one parcel touches another, they could be burning separate things on those properties. Another thing we talked about in there is standalone brush piles. So this is a very large change from our previous resolution, and this is a direct consequence from the Cottonwood complex. So the Cottonwood complexes, as many of us know, were started by these standalone brush piles. The standalone brush piles would be a brush pile that's not included in a big agricultural burn. It's just a brush pile in a field somewhere, or a brush pile not close to a house, just a large brush pile sitting there. And they're not allowed to initiate that burn within 72 hours of a high fire danger day. What we're finding is people look at the weather for that single day, they say, yeah, it's a good day to burn. They light their brush piles, they light multiple brush piles, but 2 or 3 days later, that's when the wind kicks up, and those are what's causing a lot of our large fires. So we believe by putting those standalone brush piles in there, separate from the rest of the resolution, that it would benefit all of us to make sure they're looking at their weather and looking at things 3 days in advance. Some of the other minor changes in there is our dispatchers are in there where they can give permissions. Before it was in there where they wouldn't advise weather conditions or anything else. Now when someone calls in, our dispatch center will tell them if it's a good or bad day to burn, and they'll also tell them if a burn ban's in effect. And then the final major change in there is if you violate the resolution, it can be a Class B misdemeanor, up to $1,000 fine, or up to 180 days in jail. The previous resolution was a $500 fine and 3 days in jail, a $500 fine and 30 days in jail. And what was happening is some of our larger producers in the county were calling us asking, hey, what's the fine if I go ahead and choose to burn these days? And $500 wasn't enough to prevent some of our larger producers from burning on days they shouldn't be. Also in the future, we talk about burn bans, and burn bans are always a hot topic in the county. We do still have the authority to issue a temporary burn ban. Temporary burn ban is something that's been in the resolution for a few years. It's myself or the fire administrator, Travis Vogt, can issue that temporary burn ban for 12 hours because we have insufficient resources, or there's something going on in the county where we don't think we can have a good response. That's not something that happens all the time. I went back 3 years to figure out how many temporary burn bans we've issued. We've issued 13 in the past 3 years, and 7 of the 13 came last year. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. We try to get out some local media on those temporary burn bans, but there's not a lot of information flowing because we're usually busy. Where someone would know there's a temporary burn ban in place is when they pick up the phone 30 minutes previous to their burn. They call dispatch. Dispatch says there's temporary burn ban. Sorry, you can't burn. The longer than 12-hour burn bans would still be in front of the Board of County Commissioners to be done so in the form of a resolution or a disaster declaration. Other than that, this was a charter resolution, so this is new to my office at least. We've never done one of these in our charter resolution. So after it's adopted by the county commission, it has to be published, and then there's a 60-day protest period for that. I believe I've touched on all the major changes, but I'll stand for any questions.
Would you tell me why you have to do a charter resolution rather than just a resolution, what the differences are?
It's because we're using the police power, we're adding a criminal statute, and that's why it was in the previous one as a misdemeanor, but to clarify it and make it
Okay.
more enforceable, that's the reason.
All right, thank you. I do have some others. On this, are we using the same present phone number that we're using rather than 911?
Yes, sir. Nothing's changed on as far as notification wise.
Does that need to be in this resolution?
It's in there.
Is it here? Okay, I missed it. I'm sorry, I skipped over it. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Okay, clarify that, because what you're asking Commissioner Hurst is on my mind. On that phone number, who are they calling?
They're calling our dispatch center, but it's a non-emergency number that they
Okay.
call. If
And-
if someone happens to call 911, it goes to the same place.
Okay, so better clarify that. Is my understanding in the past, dispatch center just received a call and didn't comment. You've worked with dispatch, and what's the difference now under the new approach?
So before, they would tell you, I can't tell you whether to burn or not. The weather conditions aren't favorable. Are you going to burn? And that caused some confusion
Sure.
in the county, because they're like, well, they're telling me the conditions aren't favorable, but then they're asking me if I can burn. Can I burn or not? And a lot of people go ahead and burn. So now when they call the dispatch center, it's a yes or no. Hey, I want to start my burn pile. This is what I'm burning. The conditions aren't favorable. You cannot burn today.
So does that yes or no come from your office to dispatch?
So they look at it can come from our office, but the dispatchers usually look at the fire index at 5 o'clock every morning, so they know for the day what they're telling people. We haven't ran into an issue where we would be on a different set of rules than what dispatch is. If there's any sort of burn ban or anything like that, that does come from our office.
Go ahead,
No,
Commissioner.
go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt Ron because I think he has more questions.
You
You were, in the past, you've been before us and said that, well, maybe it was the fire department, District 2, said that they have repeat offenders. They go out, they put out a fire, and 30 minutes later, the same person's burning again. This ordinance, does this address that?
It addresses it briefly. See if I can find a section for you.
It just seems like to me that if the fire department's taking care of one situation, why in the world would anybody?
In section number 4, it addresses that a district fire chief and or his or her designee may temporarily prohibit an individual from burning for the remainder of the day if that individual is unable to properly maintain the burn. Meaning if a fire department goes out because there is a burn, they can tell that property owner or whoever initiated that burn, you cannot start this piece of property or you cannot start these trash barrels again today. And then
So
that can
that's
be enforced.
addressing that concern that's occurred in the past.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ron, I'm sorry for
No, you go ahead, go ahead.
No, that's all my questions.
I do appreciate you looking at that, section 3, subsection C. And that was something that I had heard from regarding that. And when I got to thinking about it, it made sense to take the recreational burning out of that, because I know in my instance, I run a smoker about 10 feet from my garage, you know, and so just didn't make sense to include that when you have recreational burning would impact so many people that already has a patio next to their house and so forth. So I appreciate you looking at that, changing that.
Okay, Ron, Commissioner Hurst, I'm confused. Where are we talking about that?
Section 3,
Section 3.
C.
So, Commissioners, that is a revised version.
Yeah.
So if you choose to make a motion today, you'll have to choose to adopt a revised version. And that was a change that Commissioner Hurst requested to look at a revised version.
Okay, I'm not looking at that, I guess.
In the first one, they had recreational burning including in that section C.
Could you read that part, please? Or do I have a copy of that?
The revision, Commissioner, in the original, it did not allow any burning of like a chimenea within 50 feet of a residence. And now
Okay,
that recreation's been removed, so it would allow some fire pit style, still with control of the embers, still with, not just.
Still have to
Not just an
control
open
it.
pit, yes, but with restrictions, but would allow it within closer to residents.
Like a chimenea or,
The goal is always to have a safe resolution that meets the public safety needs, but also one that the public can live with and that people will follow. So I think that's the reason to look at some of those recreational issues, although I would encourage people to be very careful burning. Even using your smoker close to your home, Commissioner, make sure you're being careful.
one other one I had marked here. Let's say that I rent 5 pastures, okay? I've got, or 8, or whatever. I've got to fill out a permit for each one of those properties that I might burn on in the year, right?
That's correct.
When we call in, you're going to be asked a location anyway, aren't you?
Correct.
Well, why couldn't one put all those locations down on one permit? Because you're calling in anyway and giving the location.
So unfortunately, with the Schneider software that the county already has and uses, we could not put multiple properties on one burn application or one burn permit and still get those addresses to geo-verify. So we thought it was more important to be able to select a certain parcel than be able for anyone to enter whatever they wanted in that box. When our responders are going out, we want them to know exactly where they're going and which parcel of land they're going to. But you know as well as I do, some people are like, well, there's it's the quarter next to the big rock north of this intersection.
I'm glad you asked for specific location, geographic details, like the northwest quarter of section so-and-so range, whatever. But I just, we get so many papers we have to handle out there anyway.
Yeah.
And that seems like it would be much easier to have one burn pit with your location since you're calling in that location anyway.
And I wouldn't disagree with you. It was just one of the limitations of our system.
That's the limitation of your software, huh?
Yep.
Give and take.
Yeah.
Is this the software that we're talking about replacing?
Yes, it is.
So what happens then?
Mike, Carla, do you know?
We will, there is an opportunity to rebuild the same system in the new gov bill. Of course, we don't own that yet, so we don't know everything about it. It could be possible that you can select more than one location on that. We did not get into that in the demonstrations, but we will eventually move that to the gov bill application.
How often do you think we'll have permit applications with multiple parcels?
I would say quite often, but I really couldn't give you an answer on that.
That's just a comment. If the software won't handle it, I don't guess we have a choice. But it just, since we're calling in anyway, I just questioned the need to have umpteen permits.
Mike, isn't there a way to draw a line around where you want to burn versus having to pick individual parcels?
We can, the way that we're really fighting two pieces of software here. We're using the GeoVerify to get into the law enforcement software. So we have to have the exact address to match to match into the Tyler law enforcement software. So you're actually just selecting a parcel. If we had just a pure GIS application, yeah, we could draw a line and say select all of these parcels. The software that we're trying to use was not designed for that. It's designed just to create applications for permits. So if we want to do some sort of pick several parcels, we would then have to develop that in-house with our own staff and create that permitting process through that. It's not impossible. We have staff that can do that. Really, it's just a direction that we get from the board and Adam's group, but we're happy to do it whatever is best.
Is this all done on addresses?
It is right now, yes.
We don't have addresses on real
Well,
property.
but what happens is,
I can give you a
if you
legal.
select a parcel, say when you go through the map and you select a parcel, we get a geo-reference point that then we can match back to the map in the law enforcement software.
So we'll have to have a parcel number off our tax receipts to do this? You know, I've got a,
It's just like the county website where you get on the GIS map and you can zoom in and you physically select a parcel.
You
and
won't
that's-
have to have the information. It'll be there for you to grab. And once you select that parcel, it'll auto-populate the
I didn't
permit.
see that when I ran through the example. Did I
should be
miss
on
it?
the Example. I've done, I don't know how many sample burn permits, and every time I can select a parcel on the map.
So it'll automatically come up and you select that quarter or that 80 or that half section
Correct.
when you make the application out.
Yes.
Seems like we're getting awful complicated for just a simple project.
Is there a possibility for the next year you could do two things? One, if somebody's having problems, they can call either the fire office or whoever, and they can walk them through it and potentially even process it if it's complicated. I guess that the second point is, if there's a large burn, can they coordinate with your office kind of offline to the system? So it's not like, I don't want to create a situation where somebody's going to be on the computer for 3 hours, like that. Like, what you need to know is where the burn is, an address, and letting law enforcement know, right?
So, in my opinion, we have to go all in on permitting, or we'd have to modify this resolution where certain individuals aren't required to have a permit. It's I don't think we can say in one section you're required to have a permit, and then we say offline, well, if you're burning more than one parcel, call us. We're not going to require a permit.
Well, I think you can give discretion to the fire administrator, to do complicated burns in a different manner. Like, I don't know how complicated it can be, whether it's 20 parcels or 2. Like, if it's a large amount of parcels, then that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't want to create, like, I do not want to, like, everybody, the idea behind technology is it's supposed to make things easier. If we're making things harder, that's not a good use of technology, because we're just spending more money and creating more complexity. So I understand there's a component of efficiency for your staff and law enforcement, which I can get behind. But it seems like, understanding where the burn is, if there's 20 different parcels, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do 20 permits. But Or you got
Well,
other things?
Here's where I'd like to be. I'd like to go through this process on taking my actual piece of property and go through that and just see how it works. Because maybe I'm overestimating the complexity of this to do this. But that's what I would really like to do. I'd like to sit down and take my computer in and line it up and actually go through the process so that I would have a better understanding of whether it works easy or whether it works hard or whether it works too hard. And that's where I'd kind of like to be on this right now. With that, I have one other comment when we're done.
Keep going.
So let me share my thoughts on what you two are discussing. As if I understand Adam correctly, as part of the online permit, the GIS map comes up and you zoom in on their 40-acre pasture and you hit, this is what I want to do. And it just seems like to me that while I'd like a better system than what our software would allow, that if I was a rancher and I had 15 parcels that I might be burning this year in January, I sit down and by all means I'll allow you for your test case, but to me this is important that we do this right, because we've had tragedies in Reno County on burning that we need to try to eliminate. And if you're an agricultural person, there's certain things that you've got to do to be in business.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but what staff is telling us is this is the best thing that we can do. And I'm more than willing to give you 2 weeks to test the program out, but it just doesn't seem like it's that hard for an agricultural businessman to sit down in January and say, I've got a quarter here and I've got an 80 here and I've got 15 acres here, and put that down. That doesn't seem that hard to me if it's straightforward permit.
And I also agree that you're not going to burn all your things in one day.
Well, and so that's where it's better to be able to be specific about where you're burning.
Well, you make a good point in that the permit is valid for a year. So I guess in my mind I was thinking about, like, in the next week, you may have, like, for example, like, I know we own a piece of CRP property, and like finding the window to burn that has been extremely difficult.
Yeah, it has been.
And so I was thinking in the term of like, okay, now's the window, you gotta fill out the permit, and it's complicated.
Then you can choose your window you burn in.
Yeah. So
Which,
like your point, Commissioner Sellers, is that you can
Be
do
ready.
you can permit all your
Mhm.
property ahead of time. Changes my opinion a little bit.
And I find some of these agricultural things that I gotta fill out fairly complicated, but everybody's seeing that in today's world. If you're not like Commissioner Friesen and very good at the computer and so forth, it just takes time.
Does,
And-
but if we can simplify it.
And I'm all for doing what staff has said, that if there's a different way to do this in the future, I'm not against it. But to delay this important county thing, because we've got to do the best we can with what we've got today. And so I think this is a good start, and I guess my only concern about it is these 72 hours doesn't seem even like enough for these large brush piles. Haven't they been shown that you've got a 2-week situation in there? Or?
Yeah, you can show 2 weeks, you can show a month, you can show a long period of time, but in the goal of doing the the permitting process and doing this resolution is we're trying to be reasonable as well. Telling people that you can't burn or making too many stringent rules is not good for our public. It's not good for agriculture in Reno County either. So we're trying to be reasonable.
Commissioner Sellers, I'd like to comment with regard to these brush piles. Now, I know each brush pile is different, and it depends upon what you have in that brush pile, whether you've got a big stump with roots and dirt around it or not. But you can take a pretty good sized burn pile. You start in the morning, and you're out there with the equipment. Now, you're not going to start it without some equipment around. But by noon, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have this burned down to a pretty good small pile, and you've got coals left. Just simple taking a tractor out, smoothing the coals out, pushing it together. You can enhance the time it takes to burn that brush pile a lot. But you're just not going to light it and run away. You're going to do some work during that rest of the day. Now, you're not going to get it all out by night. But if there is a problem, it's like one person told me, that you can dig a hole and bury some of it. But it's management. I think you're saying the same thing too. It's management.
Yes, sir. And it's usually the ones we run into that we really have the problems with are not the responsible individuals who light one brush pile. It's the ones that don't look at any weather other than what's happening today, and they go light 10 or 70 of them.
But there's really no requirement to manage the pile.
All that's in there is that it has to be supervised by a reasonable individual.
Until what?
Until
You've
there's
got the
not
100
rules.
feet away, and I think that's sufficient in my mind. That there is.
That was the cause of many of the fires last year, wasn't it?
Well, I think that to that point, I mean, when people need to understand when they light a brush pile or anything else, they're responsible for the consequences of that, and that's why they need to do the good management that Commissioner Hurst is discussing. And if they don't, they're still responsible.
Yeah.
And it says that in here.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Okay.
most of the laws that are implemented are due to irresponsible people, not due to responsible people.
I would suggest one thing looking at, just from a standpoint of how to, and I'm going to ask you if you think this is necessary. You mentioned in here that we're supposed to have, if we do a pasture burn or CRP, we're supposed to have a 30-foot fire break. But a fire break is not defined in here. I would like to see, I think you discussed this, but I think an appropriate fire break before we had it in here, which I appreciate all of the things, because basically you followed our old resolution and just improved upon it. But we defined a fire break as mowing that distance around the property to keep it down so you could control it easier, or mechanical. And I wondered if that definition shouldn't be in there so there's no question about what you call a fire break.
So I'll ask Fire Administrator Vogt. He was in depth with those fire break conversations, so he can talk
Okay.
about some of that.
Good morning, Fire Administrator Travis Vogt. So we found, I've been a part of one of our prescribed burn associations in Pretty Prairie for several years, since its inception. We have found, and Dusty Taha with NRCS, and he couldn't be here today, but he's a better one to speak on this. We found that when people would try to use mechanical or disc or plow a fire break, what they found is there's still enough residue on top that the fire would actually creep across it, and it's harder to control because then it starts getting down underneath the sod that's turned over. Hard to control, and then once it finally finds a way to creep out of that, then it gets away from you. We found, and in the old resolution, we just had a 20-foot break. We added 10 more feet, and actually, 30 feet is an absolute minimum.
I was going to say 40 is what.
Yes, but we had to
Most
put a
around.
number somewhere. But mowed very short is much easier to control and maintain than actually turning sod, because of the residue that you're trying to get rid of. Ultimately get rid of. So we found over, and it's
we've burned, in our PBA, we've burned with parcels that have been disked or plowed, and we've actually told the landowners and farmers that are involved in this, do not do that, because we prefer just to have it mowed. It's easier to control that way.
And that's what I was getting around. Should you define that as mowing in the definition so that somebody goes out here knows exactly what a fire break is?
Yeah,
That's
we
the only
had-
thing I question is defining fire break.
Yeah, we had extensive conversations on that, and we just came to the point of a break, because
Okay.
you can do it either way. Some would choose to rototill it. If you had, we have seen the 6-foot PTO rototiller, which actually does a better job than plowing, because it creates a break and gets rid of that residue that you're looking to avoid coming across. So that is an option. So we didn't want to. I think our direction was not to specify, because there are several options. Well, you get into multiple options, and they're hard to define in one resolution.
That's was my question is, from a legal standpoint, should it be defined or not? That you
Yeah,
pretty well answered it. So
In the prior resolution, and coming from the sheriff's department, I was involved in a lot of the violations of the old resolution and cases being filed. And when it comes to fire breaks, the ones I can't recall any of them going to court off the top of my head, but fire breaks, we never ran across that issue. The district attorney, Tom Stanton, was involved in this, and he didn't
Okay.
raise any issues with that.
all right. Mr. Good. I know even when you mow, you've got stubs out there that you have to call it back up on.
You have more questions?
One more, two more, really. I had a discussion, and Don brought this up, as to liability regarding hiring someone, a contract burner, and I reviewed that with our county attorney, and I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, if I misinterpret you, Patrick, but if you have the contract burner go in and get the permit, rather than me going in to get the permit and having him contract burn, if he goes in and gets that permit, then the liability, as much as feasible, goes to that contract burner.
From my understanding, it's whoever lights the match on the burn is the ultimately responsible for that burn.
But I would suggest that we look at if you have a contract burner go in, that he gets a permit.
And I'll add, and once you do a test run of the permit system, there's owner information. So if you own the parcel, your information will be there, but then whoever's conducting the burn, their information will be separate in there. So it's basically who's responsible for it is
Okay.
listed separate in the
All right.
application.
The only other thing I want you to do is, in my opinion, is tell me how you will communicate all this information to the people effectively so that they know.
So Travis has already gone out to the Farm Bureau conference and briefly touched on this, but we've also talked with the NRCS and Extension Office. They'll help push this message out. We plan on putting it in the media, to hopefully do some radio shows as well to push it out as much as possible. We know there's going to be a learning curve in this first year or so, so we're going to be available to help walk people through this process and really treat it more as education instead of immediate enforcement. We want the education before we enforce anything.
You might also look at sending information out to the Reno County President of the Kansas Livestock Association. I think she would do a good job of getting it out to the members. Thank you. That's all.
Sorry, Commissioner, just to clarify, and probably a little bit of legal minutia, but from the county's perspective, we look at the permit holder. The landowner we can't absolve the landowner for any civil liability if the neighbor was mad about a burn issue. But from the county's perspective, it's the permit applier that's who we consider to be liable, if that makes any sense. And maybe it doesn't. It's kind of, you're getting dangerously close to legalese, and I don't want to drag us down.
Okay, I've got a couple questions real quick. On section 3A, is it possible to allow the permit holders to renew so they don't have to go back and fill their permit out again? Like, let it expire if they don't renew, but if they say, I want to renew these properties, they don't have to do it again.
That's something I think we need to explore this year, is if they can renew. And another question we had for IT was if maybe around the 15th of December, if there's an email that can be sent to all these permit holders to remind them that they have to renew or fill out a new permit. So
Can
that's
we-
something we'll be exploring.
Can we adjust the language to allow that? Because right now it seems like it will expire.
So their current permit will expire. So what we're doing with all the permitting is we're starting them with the year that they're issued. So for example, 2023 is going to start with a 23, and they'll get a new permit number every year. What that'll do, it'll make it easy on our dispatchers when they're calling in with their permit number. They know if they're calling in, giving them a 2022 permit number, they know that's no longer valid for the 2023 year.
Recreational burning on subsection D of section 3. I mean, this would prohibit outdoor fireplaces, chimneys, fire pits in the entire county except for incorporated areas when any one of these 5 items occurs.
That's correct.
No matter if you have, you know, a 200-foot green grass barrier, that it seems like nobody's going to follow that.
We discussed that in depth as well. And one of the issues we were running into last year was we had a county burn ban, and people are still out there with their bonfires, with their recreational fires. They're saying, well, we can start my burn pit. It's a recreational fire.
Commissioner Friesen, if you did adopt the revised version that wasn't in the packet but came out this morning, that would solve that. That would remove the recreational burning from 3D.
Well, can't you refine the definition if you feel like people are gaming the definition?
Yeah, and that's an option, and then we definitely could. To some extent, I mean, we definitely can. We're,
I mean-
trying to move the goalpost and make this manageable. The problem is, people will always try and, you just have to give us direction on how much regulation you want us to try and have, because there are always gonna be people that try and find the holes and make arguments, around these things.
To me, I think that's okay, because if you look at the definition of the grassland fire index of being very high or above, you're looking at a combination of heat, wind, and humidity.
Yeah, but it also includes any wind speed above 15 mile an hour, which is,
That's open burning only, though. That only applies to open burning, correct?
That's correct.
Which is a brush pile.
okay.
So the letters from the public that we've received about their chimney, and so forth wouldn't apply to the open burning?
So it would not apply to it would apply to when there's a burn ban in effect, the grassland fire danger index very high or above, or if it creates a safety hazard to an airport or traffic safety hazard.
And how do you know that?
So if it's a high produces lots of smoke and it's blowing across a roadway or blowing across the airport,
I mean, that's not recreational burning at that point.
in my opinion, it's not.
My smoker doesn't give off that much smoke. Done a lot of work on this.
On section 3I, I know a lot of times, like a school will have a bonfire, and they'll put a bunch of pallets together to fuel that's prohibited.
So it's prohibited on open burning,
Which includes all burning.
which does not include recreational burning.
Yeah, it
Open
does.
burning and recreational burning are two separate
Okay.
things.
Okay, so there's open burning, agricultural open burning, and recreational burning. Okay. Thanks, I'm getting there pretty quick. Didn't, section 4, didn't we allow the county administrator to issue these as well in the past?
So in consultation with Randy, that's something we changed. He asked if it makes more sense for the fire administrator to also have that authority instead of his office.
What
we
happens
thought it
if-
did.
That office is vacant.
Well, I think it's Adam, the director, or the fire administrator could do that. So it'd be very unlikely that both of them would be unavailable.
Okay. In section 5, when a local disaster is called initially, it's not the county commissioners that usually issues that because of the timing. Does that read no differently?
I think we're talking about two different things. So the local disaster declarations that we put in place when there's a large fire or something in the county, when you deem that local disaster for, say, the Cottonwood complex, my office takes on some of that responsibility, and we'll usually do a burn ban at the same time because of lack of resources with that disaster declaration. Section 5 specifically looks at a burn ban, and a burn ban would be a special meeting, or we would come to a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners and request that burn ban in the form of a resolution.
But this is just referencing a local disaster declaration.
A burn ban's a form of a local disaster declaration. It's not the one where a chair declares one in an emergency. Yeah, so I think a burn ban does cite some local disaster as the authority for doing a burn ban. So it's a special. I would, and again, I guess I'm kind of legalistic today, but a burn ban is a form of a local disaster legislation. But it's not the one that you might be thinking of where in an emergency, a chair has the ability to declare a local disaster because there's not even time to convene a board meeting.
But this is just additional authority, it doesn't preclude that
It's just
authority.
making clear that how the burn ban would be something the Board of Commissioners would do. That's
Mhm.
all it's trying to accomplish.
But there can still be an emergency burn ban
Yeah,
issued if commission has yet to.
by a vote of the commissioners.
Mhm.
I think that's a board thing, not a chair thing.
Okay. Well, that's still confusing to me because the emergency declarations are a chair thing.
Right, so this is not but a burn ban is a commission vote, not a chair vote.
Okay. So why is it called a local disaster declaration?
Because when you declare a burn ban, you're saying there's a local disaster that necessitates a burn ban. It's a form of local disaster in that the conditions are so bad locally that you have to do a burn ban.
Okay. This was well done. I appreciate the work. I appreciate that it's not that complicated. So are we ready to vote today?
I would like the opportunity to run through the process of getting a permit, and then that's where I'm at. I'm with regard to most of it, everything else that we've discussed, and the changes that you've made at the request of the citizens, and to put it maybe on the consent agenda next time.
I would concur to let Commissioner Hurst do his due diligence. I might suggest you might have somebody help you fill out that permit, though.
You know, we learn by errors.
Yeah.
No, I will probably get a hold of these gentlemen right here. Okay? That meet your satisfaction?
I would hope that we do get this on the agenda
Yeah.
next time for approval. I think they've done an excellent job of this. There's probably some things that they might change in the future, but it's a step forward from several disasters we've had in the past.
The only thing I would have done had this gone to a vote today was offer one small change to section 3A associated with, to the extent technically feasible, that permit holders are given notice and option to renew their permit. Even if you issue a new permit number, I think that would save on some of the paperwork associated with renewal every year. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that
amendment?
sure be fine.
And give IT a challenge for next year.
Yeah. Okay.
Mike needs that, don't you, Mike?
We can always use another challenge.
Okay, so it sounds like there's consensus on that small amendment, and Commissioner Hurst is gonna,
I just really would like to run through it just to see how it really works.
okay. Hearing no further discussion, we'll, let's see. I think by consensus, we're gonna table that to the next meeting, so,
Commissioner,
yes.
if I may suggest that we don't table it unless you want to put it under business items. If you table it, it'll have to go under business items. Makes me no difference, but that's, you table it to the next meeting, if we just put it, go through it, and it comes up on the consent agenda with those changes, then.
You don't
that
think
be
it can
handled
come on the consent agenda if it's
Hmm?
tabled?
Uh-uh.
Well,
However
I
you wanna
don't,
handle it.
it
I'm
doesn't,
not in this fight.
it doesn't matter. I think by consensus, we're gonna put it on the next meeting's agenda, and I expect it to be on the consent agenda. How about that?
That's great.
Okay. 2022, sorry, 7C, the 2022 Human Resources Annual Report is next.
Morning. Helen Foster, Human Resources. We've had several challenges for the year of 2022, mostly in implementing the new pay structures and policy. However, it's still been a good year, and we still were able to navigate that pretty efficiently. We have the new evaluation system that went into place. We're in that cycle right now, and I have to say things are going very smooth. A big shout out to IT because they've been instrumental in making our evaluation process smooth. They have worked really hard for those individuals that do not have network access to make it available to them for them to be able to do the evaluations. Our successes this year have by far been the HR staff. Our staff in HR are fully trained. Most of us are a year under our belt, and everybody has done really well this year, as well as the Reno County staff too. I think we have wonderful employees. We've implemented the compression adjustments. We're getting ready to roll out pay for performance for 2023, and so those are big successes. But one of the biggest time savers that we've had this year is going to electronic files. So that has been huge. It's saved on paper, it's saved on time for filing, and we're loving the electronic files. Workers' compensation, we haven't had a whole lot go on in work comp. We have several claims that have come through this year. Most of them have been small claims, first aid or one initial visit, and we're good. A lot of them bloodborne pathogens, which those require a couple visits, but it's fairly easy. They just test them for different diseases if they had a needle stick. And then turnover, that's probably the highlight of 2022. Our turnover looks pretty good. That's only reflecting 11 months, but still, even if we were pretty close through December, and it doesn't look like that's going to change a whole lot. So I think that's going to be pretty close to our yearly turnover rate. Onboarding, we've had a lot of new employees. We've had a lot exit. However, I think December is showing an increase. I reported to the department directors just this weekend we had 8 applications, which is really huge for our office. And it wasn't just one particular job opening, so it was across the board. So I think we're seeing things turn around. Maybe that's good news for 2023 on our onboarding and our applications. And then many of the goals that we have in human resources are going to be rolling out some annual training to our employees, mostly over sexual harassment, workplace harassment. I'm going to be working really hard with our communications specialists for some advertising avenues, trying to reach out to a larger portion of people for our applicants, and our HPO promotion. So one of the things that we want to do is a really nice video that incorporates the commissioners, the county administrator, that we can present to our new employees. One of the goals with that is so that they recognize your face. It gives them a good way to approach you and be able to introduce themselves. Works kind of as an icebreaker, and also to allow the employees to know what Reno County is about. So that is my annual update. I have a paper in there that has a lot of the specific information, but I would be welcome to questions.
Commissioner Hurst. Commissioner Sellers.
Thank you, well done.
Well, I'd like to concur with what Commissioner Hurst just said. Helen, it seems like your department has had significant items to deal with this year, more than you would desire. But it seems like to me, from our standpoint, my standpoint, that those have been handled the best that they could be handled, and I appreciate your work as HR director.
The kudos really goes to my staff. They're
Good.
wonderful staff. And also kudos to the commission for being so good at supporting our employees. It's seen and it's felt, so we appreciate that.
Helen, good job. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
report. Appreciate it. Item 7D, Randy?
This is where Mike and Carla from IT and Public Health had requested for GovBuilt to be used for their permitting process instead of Schneider. And I'd asked Mike to be here to present on this.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Matthews, Information Technology Director. Just to kind of give you a little background on why we're presenting this. Back in the spring, the Health Department chose to move their EHR to CureMD. As part of that, we're going to eliminate the KIPS software, environmental health and child care licensing. Also use that to track some items. So with that software going away, we're going to have to do something for environmental health and licensed child care. Our initial thought was we would build that in-house, but after the discovery period, we discovered that it was a little more than we could take on with our current staff. It's not that they couldn't do it, it's more of a time drain on them. So IT started looking for some sort of a application that we could combine everything into one. We did not set out to really go away from Schneider Geo permits, but when we started reviewing all these softwares, they all had that portion in them. So that's kind of why we will be trying to move away from that. This will allow them to combine. Right now they were using KIPS, is a spreadsheet and an access database to capture all their information. All of that will be brought into one application. So when they're in the field, whether they're in the office or in the field, they'll have all of their information with them. They'll have their program to do all the things that they need to do. It will integrate with our current GIS system. So that's kind of why we're here. We looked at several applications. This one was the preferred for both IT and the health department, but we did look at another one called Excella. It was a lot more money. And we looked at another one called Inspect-A-Go, and although it might have worked, the annual expense was a lot more than this one. So in the long run, we would have spent more money on that particular one. So this basically gives the environmental health and the licensed child care people one place instead of going to several different pieces of software to keep track of their of one piece of property and one application process. So our first year expense for this is $67,900. And then the annual subscription is $18,600 ongoing. Now we will probably not right away because of the burn permit, but we will be eliminating Schneider Geo permitting, so that's a $10,400 expense we won't have.
Is that yearly?
Yes, annually. This GovBuilt is a much broader application than just this. They have other things that we could do. We could bring like building permitting and that sort of thing into this also. But GovBuilt will also, like we use Civic Plus to maintain our website. Right now, GovBuilt has that same capability. I'm not saying that we need to switch, but if we wanted to, we could move that all into one platform. They're going to provide us on-site training. These folks are out of Manhattan, so they're relatively close to us. We're going to integrate this with our document management system, so anything we scan will be available from both applications. Like I say, we'll have integration with the ESRI, which is our GIS. They're going to migrate. We're going to export the data that's in KIPS now and the access data and import that into this software. So all of their history will be here when they go live with this. They include, helping us build a number of permits and inspection forms, all of those kinds of things as part of the one-time implementation. So kind of in short, that's why we're here, and I can try to answer any questions that you have. I do think, earlier we spoke about the burn permit. Based on what I'm hearing is we're kind of wanting to do, I think we could try to move that into this, but I think it's more of a custom application. These are really for one-time services, and if we want to do renewals and that sort of thing, we would of course try to build it in this application first, but I don't want to sit here and tell you that that's what we're going to do, because I really don't know. Depending on where we land on where we want that burn permit to look like.
Okay, my question, either to Mike or to Carla, is that somewhere in the dialogue that was sent to us on this additional agenda item is the reason for requesting this before the end of the year is that we're using some type of grant funds for the purchase.
Yeah,
would you explain how that works? Because Mike just said it's dollars, and it sounds like maybe it's not our dollars. I don't know. Dr. Carla?
Good morning, Commissioners. Carla Nichols, Director of Public Health. So Part of these grant funds, we did have budgeted in the health department budget for software in 2022. We haven't used all of that when we implemented our CureMD, so we do have funds available for this one-time implementation. And so we wanted to make sure those funds could be encumbered this year and then utilize those budget funds.
And a certain grant that you received allowed for
Yes, sir.
funds to be used for technology.
Yes, sir.
How much is grant funded?
The 67,900?
The entire amount?
Yes, sir.
So the only question is the increase in yearly software or management costs.
That would be correct, yes. But I
And
would
that's,
like to point out,
what,
it's gonna do.
$8,000 a year
it's-
difference?
It will
once
do a
we-
lot more than the one we're
Snyder's
getting
doing.
now.
And do you really feel we can get rid of Snyder in the near future?
I think we will probably have to keep it for 23, depending on when we start the burn permit. But I don't think we'll keep it any longer than that. When I go downstairs, I'll communicate to staff to start doing a discovery on how we're going to do that burn permit. But based on the conversations that I heard earlier, I think we're going to probably wind up custom on that. And we'll have to write that in-house.
Mike, what do you think for the $49,300 they could make us a burn permit?
We will certainly ask them. That will be part of our, when we have discovery with them, part of our discussion. They were pretty hungry for our business, so I would expect they would be willing to examine that.
What? On the grant money, we just have grant money laying around, or?
No, we were maybe gonna use it for something else, maybe coverage of maybe staff time or other technology, but when environmental health started looking at this and we hadn't utilized all of that money for CureMD, then we thought this would be the best placement for maybe looking at enhancement for another department in the health department also. And then also it helps IT and maybe other Reno County departments that could access this, so it's not just for the health department. We're looking at other departments also. And like I told Mike, of course, with our discovery, we'll let GovBuilt know that maybe our first priority would be on assisting the county on this burn permit. And then we can take a backdoor so we can maybe get them up and going and we don't have to move forward with Snyder any longer and maybe get rid of one additional software.
You done?
No.
No, go ahead.
Randy, I don't want to lecture on grants today, but the thing that bothers me on grants is it seems like free money, and then all of a sudden it's like, because I heard Carla say, well, we know we could have used it to offset staff costs, which have been great. Now we're creating kind of a new cost that doesn't end when the grant ends. It's just, and so I think it incentivizes purchasing that eventually just becomes our complete obligation. So the grants out of the health department just worry me because there's just so much going on, and I don't know when when the grants leave. Are we just holding the bag? Like, do we know, like, what?
Well, the grant's gonna pay for the software, we're paying for the annual maintenance of the software.
Which we would have an annual maintenance anyways with Schneider, so we'll be changing that. But yes, we've had those discussions with the health department. Leslie, Bethany, Carla, myself have had those discussions about budgeting in the future. And as these grants that were really a lot of them because of COVID are gonna start going away, that we're going to have to, I guess, find a way to either continue those services or be more efficient without that grant money, because we don't want property taxes to go up to cover for something that was only purchased because of a grant.
Yeah.
So we're very aware of that and looking at the options. Now, the health department has numerous grants separate from COVID that will always be there through the state of Kansas and federal government.
It's a little peculiar to me whether, like, this is the intent of the grant, is to kind of create new, structure and government. And so that just worries me. But, like, do you see my point of, like, we could have used this to offset other costs that had already been encumbered, it sounds like, but instead we're offsetting a new cost, and so it's really not the same thing to me. But I can maybe get behind the software. I mean, it looks. Do we know how many permits we do a year? I'd just be curious, if you take that 18,600 divided by how many permits we issue, I'd be curious what that number is.
Does the county administrator support this proposal?
I do, with the understanding that we're going to be getting rid of the other software, Snyder, in the near future, and that this has more capabilities for staff and departments and the public.
Chairman, I make the motion that we approve item 7D as presented by staff today.
The motion to approve 7D. There's a second.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Hurst.
Now that we've got a motion and a second in here, I was struck with some of the same things that Commissioner was struck with. And when I saw the price tag on it, I got concerned as to if it was only going to be used for one particular portion of a department. I had problems. But in reviewing this a little further, and I did pick up the telephone yesterday, and I called Pot County to speak with their planner up there. Randy wasn't in, so I couldn't ask him whether he'd done it or not. So, but it's always questionable when you see somebody uses a referral and their picture and name is put down on an advertising brochure. It's always questionable whether how useful that information is. But I spoke with Stefan up there. I believe he was the second in command in the planning department in Pottawatomie County. And I asked about training, and he was satisfied with the training that went out with this program. I asked about how useful it was in more than one department and how it could be combined and used by more. And specifically, I was thinking about the relationship between environmental and the planning department. And he said it was working out fairly well. The ability of the planning department to utilize the environmental, septic tanks, water, and et cetera, and if it will simplify the system. Every time I see it go on the computer, I wonder whether it's going to simplify the system or not, just like we talked about here with the Burn Association. But in my conversations with him, I begin to see the real opportunity of using it with planning department and the environmental department. And so I believe that can be done, and it can be useful to speed up the process of the permits for a building permit. Now, we don't have building inspection out here in the county, so that's not part of it. But just to me, if the environmental and the planning department and with the dropping of the other computer program and the ability to expand this, it sounds like with no cost, then that was helpful to me.
I'd like to offer an amendment to require in the scope of work for the 49,300 that a burn permit be designed in that work. Also, do you know what the additional years, is this a 1-year agreement?
Annual contract. Or if it is a 5-year, there's clauses that Patrick has put in there that allows for budgeting purposes for us to get out of it.
Is it priced locked for 5 years?
I don't believe it is.
It's their percentage, it can go up, maximum it can go up each year.
That's what I recall.
I think it's 5%, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a 5%.
Why
That's
don't we just
not unusual.
negotiate that to 0? I mean, I'm fairly familiar with software contracts. Any sort of new contract, like, there's a lot of flexibility. Have we negotiated at all yet?
Well, we've negotiated some backup things that we wanted to have done, that we wanted to be sure of. We did not negotiate the annual amount. Now, I thought that the 5% was after 5 years, but I may need to go back and look at that.
I thought it had some ability to increase, that it wasn't a flat yearly rate.
Well, my amendment would include the burn permit in the 49.3. I'd like to see a 3-month commitment to get off of Snyder. Do you think, are we going to adopt, and when are we going to adopt the new software? First of the year?
Well, whenever we sign this, our hope is to get started as soon as possible, but I can tell you that software vendors have been slow about getting things started. You approved the district attorney software back in September, and we were told they wouldn't even start a kickoff until April.
Did we pay him?
We had to pay them $18,000.
We
But
shouldn't
that's
pay until they start the work. But what would be reasonable, Mike, if 3 months is uncomfortable?
I would say 6.
6 months.
I mean, if nothing else, and we have to build a burn permit in-house, we can have that done in 6 months.
Well, so I think
But-
my amendment to the motion would be to include the burn permit, a 6-month or less window in terminating the Snyder agreement, and then negotiating the price change to 0% for the first 5 years. Giving the county administrator latitude, if those cannot be accomplished, to make the best decision for the county.
I would second that amendment.
Okay. So, discussion on that amendment? No. A roll call on the amendment, please.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Sellers.
Yes.
Mr. Friesen.
Yes. Any other discussion on the?
I would move to approve the
Well, it's
motion.
already there.
Oops, excuse me.
we already
Go
got
ahead.
it.
Go ahead.
So roll call on that, unless there's other discussion. So roll call on the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Sellers,
Yes.
Mr. Friesen.
Motion as amended.
Cindy, did you get that amendment?
Pretty close.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Glad we have your expertise. That's a good amendment.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Sorry for the extra pressure on that.
Oh, that's all right, no big deal.
Are we ready for your report?
Yes.
Okay.
Here a second. So I have on the agenda the financial report and the monthly department report. Any questions on that? I will bring up, since part of the topic was grants and health department, just to show that the health department's budget, or year-to-date, just to kind of show that grant revenues, the various grants represent a very large portion of their revenues. 2.5 million, property taxes 967,000. So just so you kind of see that it is, right now, we do have a lot of money in grants, and when they have that, those funds right now are ending cash balance in their fund. Of course, we don't have through any encumbrances in the rest of December, and then in January it has gone from 1.2 to $2.5 million.
That's a
This
pretty
year.
big jump.
It is. So, but we are very careful with that in preserving the cash balance, preserving programs and the grants as long as possible, so that we don't end up in a year or two with the grant revenues going to 900,000 and then asking for 2 million in property tax. We are working very hard to not be in that circumstance.
And is there any accrued in this, or this is all basically cash basis shown here? Is there any
This is
accrued
cash.
expenses involved?
On the revenues, it's cash. It's when we receive it, cash basis. And actually, all this is cash basis. It doesn't show the encumbrances
Okay.
on this form.
On that form?
Yeah.
Randy, is there a way to ask them for a forecast of like when grants fall off?
Yeah. We're working on that. I can get you something, yes. I just
My
want
only comment on department reports, Randy, would be that it's very good to see that they agree with Helen's report from HR that we're doing much better in filling positions, and we're not minus as many people. And I hope when, as you're talking to directors, we'll communicate that now that we're full, let's quit saying that we can't get things done due to staffing levels.
There is one situation, though, in one department that they're down as many as they've ever been. And that's just because of qualifications.
yeah, there are some departments, even with applications, are still in bad shape. But
Some are good.
yeah, it's just difficult, and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. So those reports. I also, at one of the previous meetings, I think when the child care report was given, I was asked to come back with a report, just letting you know I'm still collecting data and getting data to kind of quantify those comments that were made. And I will bring that to your attention probably in an executive session in the near future, once I have more answers for myself. And then just keeping you up to date. Today, this afternoon, tomorrow morning, and then a couple days next week, I'm going to be taking the commissioner-elects around to all departments, so that within a week they will have visited every county department, had a chance to talk with each directors, and hopefully meet some additional staff. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep.
Commissioner reports. Commissioner Hurst.
I think one thing that sometimes we forget sometimes, and I think you've done a good job of reminding them of this, is the fact of thank all the IT staff for theirs, because they put a lot on them and to handle and everything, and to do cybersecurity on top of it. So just want to tell all the staff how much this commission appreciates so much. Yesterday, I attended a Quad County meeting with Randy and Patrick, and one thing that was brought up, Sedgwick County brought up, that I thought I would ask your opinion of, if it would be worthwhile. In Sedgwick County, they determine their legislative policy by having a partnership with their chamber, the GW, Greater Wichita, whatever group that is, partnership group, and the chamber and the city and the county all go together in developing and speaking with their legislative objectives of the year. And they felt that they had quite a bit stronger influence on their legislators when that happened because of the broad spectrum that was involved. And so I would think that maybe we need to look at doing something of the same thing with the chamber and the city and the county, and also invite any other of our rural cities, smaller communities, that would want to be involved with developing a legislative policy for our county and cities. That's about all.
Commissioner Sellers?
I didn't have anything, but since Commissioner Hurst brought up legislative policy, I would hope that Reno County makes greater effort on producing a document that we send to our local legislators that is very explicit on what we feel that they can help us be a better county. I think we've put that too much on the back burner, and the end of that communication needs to say that we would appreciate and expect their help to accomplish these items.
Is there anything in particular?
I think if you'd look at what we had, our letter last year, I don't think many of those things were ever addressed in the legislative session.
Patrick, you had something.
Yeah, just related to the legislature, which is getting ready to start, on the county councilors listserv, Riley County is going to push a bill to give counties some more power to abate nuisances. Currently, the way Kansas law is, which is a whole other discussion, cities have great ability to abate a nuisance. Counties, we really don't have good tools under the law. So anyway, to the extent, if you are talking about legislative policy with anyone, I would hope that you mention that.
That would be a good one. I remember, I think this was prior to Randy Partington coming on board. This commission spent hours talking about nuisances, and we agreed that we couldn't really be very reactive to the problem. So
we are doing what we can do. It just would be so, if we had anything to improve our toolbox, it would be wonderful. So I was encouraged that since Riley County is taking the lead, I would encourage anyone with Reno County, to include myself, to kind of at least get behind them on that. So.
Yeah, I think at that time, Commissioner Sellers, about the only crescent wrench or hammer we had in there was to take the nuisance. We had to develop a law, and then it all had to go through the district attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, is that something you could maybe put a bullet point list together for the new commission first of the year? Maybe we could go over, and I think it's a good idea to deliver, and maybe we could invite our legislative delegates here sometime in January. It's a good point. Few things on. Were you done? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
I wanted to make a couple. One comment. I noticed we, and my chairmanship ends here at the end of the year, but the consent agenda, I think we've made really good progress in utilizing it to speed things up that don't have individual commentary. But what we might think about next year is getting that list to the commissioners a little earlier. I noticed a couple times we were kind of doing business items in the consent agenda. So if depending on what the chair wants to do next year, but it seems like it might be good to give the commissioners an opportunity to kind of say, hey, I want to see that on a business item, because we were utilizing the consent agenda pretty widely today. It's not a big deal, but I like the format, but I think a couple of those items probably were better fit on the business item list in hindsight. Wanted to compliment Commissioner Sellers on his efforts with the photographic artwork that's up in the, what do you call that? The
open
foyer.
The main floor,
The
how
main
does that
floor.
sound?
Thank you for your efforts there, and I know that was a joint project with the staff, I think.
Yeah, I think that was Judge Rose's initial idea, to use some historical photos. We knew the courthouse was being painted, and certain areas we had some oddball pictures up that weren't as appropriate, I think, is what was developed. And there was a team put together, and I was glad to be on it. And I think all the pictures are up now except the ones for the basement. Those will go up later. I'd hope that people would take a look at first, third, and fourth floors.
Well, yeah, they looked great. Along those lines of things that maybe we could do better, and I know we're working through it as part of our evaluation, but still seems like this area is kind of a bit of a dumping ground from time to time, and it maybe part of that's
It's currently the fifth floor dumping ground.
okay.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like part of our purging process, and so that's fine. But the kind of outer edges of those walls have old books, and maybe we could do something different over
We
time.
will be working on the first floor when we do the interior renovations, but after that, we will try to clean up that area quite a bit.
Okay. I don't think I'm going to have any objection by either of you, but I asked Randy to get that stupid roll-off out of the parking lot in front of the courthouse by the end of the year and move it across the street if they still need it. Is there any objection to that? It's been there for a long time. I think it needs to go. So I think you're okay with that. And then the last meeting in December, the agenda is light, if non-existent at this point, and I think it would be nice for staff to not have to prepare for that. But if you two could communicate with Randy on your thoughts on whether or not that would be appropriate, fine to take your feedback on that.
When will the bids be in on the courthouse renovation?
Next Monday. But the 19th is when the bid opening is.
Okay.
We delayed it about a week, or I think twice, so 2 weeks, knowing that if it was gonna be done by the end of the year, the 27th was the meeting. Otherwise, it would wait till January.
So,
It's fine with me if
I'm
we don't have enough business. I think that bid opening's somewhat important, or the consideration of that, but if that doesn't get decided this year, it can fall into the new commission, so.
Okay. Randy, you want to, and again, please just let Randy know what your thoughts are on the end of the month meeting, but do you want to briefly go over again the plan for is it the second Monday in January?
Second Monday in January.
Okay.
The commission would have met on January 10th, I think, which is the Tuesday. Based on statute, the swearing in of new commissioners is to be on the second Monday in January, which is the 9th. So the plan is to move the meeting from Tuesday to Monday that week. So it'd be on January 9th. Open the meeting with 3 commissioners at 9 a.m. and then at 10 a.m. Judge Rose is scheduled to be over at the annex, because it'll be over at the courthouse or the annex conference room, to do swearing ins at 10 a.m. That first bit would be whether it's consent agenda, get through a couple items, some of the items maybe that have been tabled, and then let Commissioner Sellers have a chance if he wants to, say anything before he leaves. The swearing in take place, the new commission, the 5 commissioners take their seats and do the reorganization, which would be the selection of the chair, vice chair, and any committees or any other work they want to discuss at that meeting, and then adjourn.
Okay. Thanks for that update. Any questions for Randy on that? One last item, wanted to welcome Bonnie, City Clerk of Highland. She's a new city clerk. Mayor Moore is here as well. They just wanted to come and be part of the meeting today, so welcome. Having said that, we have 2 executive sessions today. I think we're going to take, is a 5-minute break okay? Good enough? Is that all right? So the first executive session, so I'd make a motion for the commission to enter into executive session until, how much time do we need on?
We need 30. I don't know, we need 30.
Do you think you need the full 30, Adam, or can you do a little bit less?
Let's do 15 to start. Let's until 11:30 with the county administrator and county counselor to discuss the subject of performance of one or more non-elected county personnel with the executive session justified by the need to discuss in confidence personnel matters of non-elected personnel. And
Chair, sorry. When I wrote that motion, I forgot to include the fire administrator and the emergency manager.
amended as requested by the county counselor. And we'll start at, let's just start at 11:15.
I second.
The second,
Yes,
yes.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
I guess it should be.
Commissioners,
That's
the HR
okay.